Where are you right now? Maybe you're on the subway, earbuds in, scrolling through this on your phone. Maybe you're at your apartment in Brooklyn, laptop open on the kitchen table. Or maybe you're at a coffee shop in the West Village, oat milk latte next to your keyboard, doing that very New York thing of being surrounded by strangers and completely alone at the same time. Wherever you are, here's something worth thinking about. That space, the ceiling above you, the sounds around you, the light coming through the window, is already changing the way you think. Right now, without asking permission. We tend to blame ourselves when we can't focus. We blame our willpower, our phone, our attention span, and when ideas won't come, we blame our talent. But what if the problem isn't you? What if the room you're sitting in is quietly working against you, or for you, and you never even noticed? Today we're going to talk about what science has actually discovered about how physical space shapes the way our brains work. And some of it is genuinely strange. Let's start with a building most New Yorkers walk past every day without thinking twice. Grand Central Terminal. 44 million people pass through it every year. The main concourse ceiling rises about 38 meters above the floor. That's about as tall as a 12-story building, just open, above your head. There's a reason people stop in the middle of the rush and look up. Something happens in that space. The noise fades a little. Your shoulders drop. Your mind opens just slightly, like a window you didn't realize was stuck. Now compare that to the average Manhattan studio apartment. Ceilings at maybe 8 feet. Walls close. Every surface covered in the stuff of daily life. You sit at your desk, which is also your dining table, which is 2 feet from your bed. And you're supposed to come up with great ideas there? Here's the thing. The difference you feel between those two spaces isn't just aesthetic. It's neurological. And in 2007, 2 researchers decided to figure out exactly what was going on. Joan Myers-Levy at the University of Minnesota and Rui Zhu at the University of British Columbia set up one of the most satisfyingly simple experiments in psychology. 2 rooms, same furniture, same lighting, same everything. One difference, ceiling height. One room had 10-foot ceilings, the other had 8-foot ceilings. 2 feet, that's it. The difference between a decent Manhattan apartment and a slightly nicer Manhattan apartment. They put people in both rooms and gave them the same tasks, word puzzles that tested how flexibly they could think, whether they could make unexpected connections between ideas. And the results were clear. People in the 10-foot room were significantly better at thinking broadly, at finding abstract connections, at seeing the bigger picture. People in the 8-foot room were better at detail-oriented tasks, finding specific errors, checking accuracy, focusing on a single piece of information. Myers-Levy explained it this way. When you're in a high-ceilinged room, your brain primes the concept of freedom. Not consciously. You don't think, high ceiling, I am free. It just happens automatically, below the level of awareness. And that feeling of freedom opens up your thinking. You process information more relationally, connecting things, seeing patterns, thinking wide. Low ceilings prime the opposite. Constraint, confinement. And those concepts pull your thinking inward. You become sharper, more precise, more focused on the specific item in front of you. Your brain reads the room, literally. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but I live in New York. My apartment has 8-foot ceilings. My office has a drop ceiling and fluorescent lights. What am I supposed to do about that? Hold on, because this is where it gets actually useful. The research isn't saying high ceilings are always better. It's saying different ceilings produce different types of thinking, and both types have their place. Think about the kind of work that requires precision. Reviewing a contract, proofreading a report, auditing a spreadsheet, debugging code, going through legal filings line by line. For that kind of work, a low, enclosed, quiet space is genuinely better. The constraint helps. Your brain needs to stay narrow and focused, not wander off into abstraction. But now, think about the kind of work where you need to come up with something new. A pitch, a strategy, a creative concept, a solution to a problem you've been stuck on for a week. For that, you need the opposite. You need your brain to loosen up, make unexpected connections, see things from a different angle. And that's when your environment matters most. This is why some of the best creative work gets done in places like the New York Public Library on Fifth Avenue, with its cathedral ceilings and vast reading rooms. Or in the Oculus at the World Trade Center, where the white ribs of the roof soar 30 meters overhead. Or yes, in a coffee shop in Soho with 15-foot brick walls and open windows facing the street. These spaces aren't just nice to be in. They're actively changing the type of thinking that's possible inside them. Speaking of coffee shops, let's talk about why they work. Because there's actual science here, and it's more specific than you'd think. In 2012, a researcher named Ravi Mehta at the University of Illinois ran a study on ambient noise and creativity. He wanted to know whether the background hum of a coffee shop, the espresso machines, the murmured conversations, the door opening and closing, was actually helping people think, or whether it was just something people had convinced themselves was nice. He tested 3 conditions: a quiet environment at about 50 decibels, a moderate coffee shop noise level at 70 decibels, and a loud environment at 85 decibels. The sweet spot was 70 decibels. That moderate level of background noise, roughly equivalent to the sound of a highway, heard from inside a moving car, consistently produced the highest scores on creative thinking tasks. Dead quiet was worse. Loud was worse. 70 was the Goldilocks zone. Why? Mehta's explanation is counterintuitive. A moderate level of noise creates a mild, low-level distraction, and that mild distraction actually helps. It prevents your brain from becoming too narrowly focused on the task at hand, which keeps your thinking looser, more associative, more open to unexpected connections. Too quiet, and your mind locks in too tight. Too loud, think the L train at rush hour, or a packed bar in the meatpacking district, and your brain is just fighting to process the noise, leaving no bandwidth for actual thinking. But right in the middle? That's what you get at a coffee shop at 10 in the morning on a Tuesday. The hiss of the espresso machine. 2 people at the next table talking about a TV show you don't watch. Someone's phone vibrating on the counter. 70 decibels. Just enough. This is also why a lot of New York's best thinking happens not at desks, but in transit. On the subway, you've got the rumble of the train, the occasional announcement, the ambient presence of other humans all doing their own thing. It's not silent. It's not overwhelming. It's somewhere in between. And that somewhere in between turns out to be where the brain likes to work when it needs to come up with something. There's a deeper reason for all of this, and to understand it, we need to talk about a theory developed by 2 psychologists named Yakov Trope and Nira Lieberman. They call it construal level theory. The name is academic, but the idea is elegant. When something feels close to us, physically, temporally, socially, we think about it concretely. We zoom in. We focus on the specific details, the how, the immediate steps. When something feels distant, we think about it abstractly. We zoom out. We see the big picture, the why, the broader patterns. This isn't just about time. It applies to physical space too. When you're in a tight, enclosed environment, your brain registers closeness, and closeness triggers concrete, detailed, narrow thinking. When you're in a large open space, a loft in Tribeca, a park in Central Park, a rooftop in Long Island City with the Manhattan skyline in front of you, your brain registers distance and openness. And that triggers abstract, expansive, creative thinking. This is why so many New Yorkers have their best ideas while walking across the Brooklyn Bridge, or sitting at the edge of the Hudson, or even just standing on a high floor looking out over the city. The physical openness is being translated directly into cognitive openness. And it cuts the other way too. When you're crammed into a phone booth-sized WeWork phone room to take a call, or sitting in the middle seat on a commuter train, your brain goes narrow. Detail mode. Which is fine if that's what the task requires. Not fine if you're trying to think of a new business concept. The space is thinking before you are. Now let's talk about something that will feel very familiar if you've ever had a breakthrough while walking. In 2014, researchers at Stanford University, Marilia Pezzo and Daniel Schwartz, ran a series of experiments on walking and creative thinking. They wanted to know if walking actually improved creativity, or if that was just something people said because it sounded enlightened. The answer was clear. Walking significantly boosted creative output. People who walked while working on creative tasks produced almost twice as many original ideas as people who sat. But here's the twist, and this is the part that surprised even the researchers themselves. It didn't matter where you walked. People who walked outdoors, fresh air, trees, open sky, performed about the same as people who walked on a treadmill facing a blank wall inside a windowless room. Think about that. A treadmill, blank wall, no view whatsoever, and still, creativity nearly doubled compared to sitting. The environment wasn't the key variable, movement was. The act of walking itself shifts the brain into a more open, generative mode. Something about the rhythm, the physical engagement, the mild increase in blood flow, it loosens up the thinking in a way that sitting simply doesn't. This is why Steve Jobs was famous for his walking meetings. Not just at Apple, but throughout his career. He said he did his best thinking on his feet. It's why some of the most successful people in finance, media, and tech in New York prefer a walk around the block to a conference room for certain kinds of conversations. The brain has two gears, roughly speaking. Focused mode, where it locks onto a specific task and processes it deeply, and diffuse mode, where it wanders, makes unexpected connections, and generates new ideas. Sitting keeps you in focused mode. Walking shifts you toward diffuse. And for creative work, diffuse is exactly what you need. There's one more detail from the Stanford study that's worth mentioning. The creativity boost lingered. Even after people sat back down following a walk, their creative thinking remained elevated for a period of time. So if you've been stuck on something and you go walk a few blocks and come back, the walk wasn't wasted time. It was the work. There's one more thing affecting your brain that most people in offices never think about. Light. Researchers at Northwestern University studied office workers and measured their sleep quality based on how much natural light they were exposed to during the day. The results were striking. Workers in offices with no windows, working entirely under artificial light, slept an average of 46 fewer minutes per night than workers in offices with windows. 46 minutes. That's not nothing. That's the difference between being rested and being subtly, chronically drained. And the downstream effects on focus, creativity, and mood are significant. A Cornell University study found that workers who sat near windows reported 51% fewer headaches, 63% fewer cases of eye strain, and a 56% reduction in daytime drowsiness. They could concentrate longer, they felt better, they performed better. In New York, this hits different, because a lot of us are working in spaces where natural light is genuinely scarce. Basement apartments, interior offices, cubicles 3 rows from the nearest window in a midtown office building. The city is extraordinary, but it is not always generous with sunlight. This is why, if you've ever noticed that you feel sharper and more alive on days when you work from a coffee shop near a window, or from a bench in Central Park, or a table outside at a restaurant in the Flatiron, it's not the coffee doing all the work, it's the light. Your brain has a biological need for natural light. It regulates your circadian rhythm, your energy levels, your mood. When it doesn't get it, something quietly goes wrong. When it does get it, something quietly goes right. So let's put this all together. What does the science actually tell us about where and how to work? First, when you need to focus, to proofread, to analyze, to go through something line by line, a quieter, more enclosed space works in your favor. The constraint is an asset. The narrower the environment, the narrower and sharper your attention. Your kitchen table with the door closed, a quiet corner of the library, a small private office, these are actually good for this kind of work. Second, when you need to think creatively, to pitch, to plan, to solve a problem you've been stuck on, to come up with something new, open up the environment. Get to a coffee shop. Find a spot with high ceilings. Sit near a window. The goal is to give your brain a sense of space, of distance, of possibility. Third, when you're completely stuck and neither focused nor open space is working, walk. Not to a meeting, not to the deli and back. Just walk, without a destination, without looking at your phone. Around the block, along the High Line, through Prospect Park, down to the water. Your brain will begin to generate during the walk, and that generation will continue after you sit back down. Fourth, light matters more than you probably realize. If you can get yourself near a window, even for part of the day, do it. It affects your sleep, your energy, your ability to sustain attention. The light is not just nice, it's functional. And fifth, and maybe most importantly, stop trying to do all your thinking in the same place. The biggest mistake most people make is treating their workspace as a single, fixed environment where all types of thinking happen equally well. They sit at the same desk, in the same chair, facing the same wall, and expect focused, analytical thinking and expansive, creative thinking to both be available to them in the same spot. They won't be, not consistently. One of the most useful things you can do, especially in New York, where you have an extraordinary range of environments available within a few subway stops, is match the space to the task. Narrow work in narrow spaces. Creative work in open spaces. Stuck? Move your body. Let's go back to where we started, Grand Central Terminal. If you've ever walked through the main concourse during morning rush, 40,000 people an hour moving through that space, you've probably noticed something. Even in the middle of all that organized chaos, something feels possible there. Big. Open. The ceiling's so high, it almost doesn't register as a ceiling. The light coming through those arched windows. New Yorkers walk through it every day on their way to something else, and most of them don't realize they're walking through one of the best designed thinking spaces in the world. Not because of the architecture specifically, but because of what that architecture does to a brain. Your space is not just where you work, it is part of how you work. And now that you know that, you don't have to leave it to chance. The ceiling above you is already talking to your brain. The noise around you is already setting a dial. The light coming through the window, or not coming through, is already adjusting what you're capable of. The question isn't just where to sit. The question is, what do I need to think right now, and where does that kind of thinking happen best? That's not a small question. That might actually be one of the most practical questions you can ask yourself before you open your laptop every morning. Because the best version of your thinking doesn't live at your desk. It lives wherever you let it.